Do you believe that the fate of millions of people, the outcome of the greatest war in human history, and the collapse of the mighty Third Reich were decided by something so small it's almost laughable? 89 millimeters. Exactly 8.9 centimeters. It is shorter than the iPhone you were holding in your hand. It seems like nothing. Yet, in 1941, this 89 millimeters gap became an invisible wall that stopped the Nazi war machine dead in its tracks, turning an invincible army into frozen statues in the middle of white snow fields. Welcome back to the Hard Learned Lessons series. Today, we won't talk about guns, ammo, or genius military tactics. We are going to talk about every manager's worst nightmare, logistics and standardization failure. Let's rewind to June 22, 1941. The day Hitler decided to go all in on a gamble and lost painfully, simply because Russian train tracks were fatter than German ones. June 1941, Nazi Germany is at the peak of its power. They had just served up France in 6 weeks, making all of Europe tremble. Blitzkrieg lightning war became a global terror. The formula was simple. Tanks rush in front, planes cover from above, infantry cleans up the rear. Fast, clean, efficient. And the next target? The Soviet Union. A land so vast that if you walked from the western border to the east, your grandchildren would be old by the time you arrived. Operation Barbarossa is launched. This is the largest invasion in human history. It's over 3 million German soldiers, 3,000 tanks, 7,000 artillery pieces, and 600,000 horses. Yes, you heard that right. The high-tech German army still used horses to haul cargo. Remember this detail. The German plan was perfect. On paper, they planned to defeat the Soviets in 3 to 4 months before winter arrived. Why were they so confident? Because they were German. They were famous for discipline, precision, and superior mechanical engineering. Mercedes, BMW, Audi, they all come from here. How could they be wrong about engineering? But there is a law in project management that Hitler forgot. Murphy's Law: anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And in this case, the error lay right beneath their feet. The Germans calculated the exact amount of ammunition needed. They calculated the fuel for the tanks, they calculated rations for every soldier, but they severely underestimated a monster called the Soviet railway system. You see, to feed 3 million troops thousands of kilometers from home, you can't use trucks. Trucks back then were terrible, and Russian roads were like swamps. You need trains? Trains are the lifeline. They are life itself. But the problem was, Germany's lifeline and Russia's lifeline didn't share the same blood type. This is where we need a bit of technical knowledge, but I promise it won't be boring. In Europe and Germany, the standard gauge for railways is 1,435 millimeters. This is the international standard. Trains can glide from France to Germany, from Germany to Italy. It's like a USB-C charger, plug it in anywhere, and it works. But in Russia, no. The Russian Empire, since the time of the Tsars, decided to be different. They used a broad gauge of 1,524 millimeters, exactly 89 millimeters wider than the German standard. Why? Conspiracy theories say Russia did it to stop invaders by rail. More realistic theories say Russian engineers wanted trains to carry more cargo and run more stably on soft ground. Whatever the reason, the result in 1941 was a logistical catastrophe. Imagine you are a German logistics officer. A train full of ammo, medicine, winter coats, and tank parts travels from Berlin to the Russian border. And stop. The track ahead is too wide. The German train wheels would derail immediately. You cannot drive a German train into Russian land. So what do? Option A, use Russian trains. No. The retreating Soviet army destroyed most of their locomotives and wagons, or they drove them away. There are no Russian trains to use. Option B, load cargo onto trucks. As mentioned, Russian roads are terrible. There aren't enough trucks, and they burn too much gas. Option C. This is the option Germany was forced to choose, and it was a nightmare. Transloading. This means unloading all cargo from the German train onto the ground, then loading it onto another train if you could find a surviving Russian one, or waiting to. Re-gauge the tracks. That's right. The German army had to send railway engineering troops along thousands of kilometers of Russian tracks, pulling out every single spike, shifting the rail inward by 89 millimeters and hammering the spikes back in. In the middle of a war zone, under partisan fire, and most importantly, the speed of repair could never catch up with the speed of the advance. German tanks moved 50 kilometers per day. The rail repair crews managed only 10 to 15 kilometers per day. The distance between the front line and the depot got larger and larger. The logistical rubber band was stretched to the breaking point. By October 1941, disaster began to knock on the door. Autumn in Russia brings the Rasputitsa phenomenon, the season of mud. Roads were wiped out. Trucks got stuck, horses died of exhaustion. At this moment, railways were the only savior. But remember, what was happening to the railways, right? Loading? 99%. Thousands of tons of cargo were piled up at border transfer stations. It's like ordering food. The delivery guy is at your front door but doesn't know how to open the gate. You starve to death in your room. At hub stations like Brest-Litovsk or Warsaw, the congestion was so terrible it was called the cardiac arrest of the transport system. Mountains of ammunition and food sat rotting in the rain. Meanwhile, on the Moscow front line, German soldiers began running out of bullets and gas. The furious German offensive slowed down, not because Russian soldiers were too strong, but because German tanks ran out of gas. They had to stop and wait for the train. And that waiting time was a death sentence, because after the mud season comes, the winter. The winter of 1941 was record-breakingly cold. German soldiers wore thin summer uniforms. Why? Not because Germany couldn't produce winter clothes. Warehouses in Berlin were full of fur, coats, gloves, and premium wool hats. In fact, the train wagons carrying winter coats had reached the border. But they were stuck there, just a few hundred kilometers away from the shivering soldiers, simply because the track gauge difference hadn't been fixed in time. Total chaos. Miss by an inch. Lose an army in the literal sense. Hundreds of thousands of German soldiers suffered frostbite casualties more than from enemy fire. Operation Barbarossa collapsed right at the gates of Moscow. So, what do we learn from this 89mm disaster? It's not just history. It's a golden lesson for any business, project, or system today. 1. The lesson of compatibility and standardization in management. A lack of synchronization between standards is the most dangerous bottleneck. If your marketing department uses software A, sales uses software B, and these two don't talk to each other, data integration failure, congratulations, you have your own Barbarossa. Customer data will be clogged up just like German trains. What makes global trade run smoothly today? The container. Every shipping container in the world has the exact same standard size. Any ship can carry it, any truck can pull it, any crane can lift it. That is the power of standardization. Germany failed because they took a proprietary system and tried to force it into a chaotic open source environment without an adapter. The lesson of supply chain: amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. This quote by General Omar Bradley is always true. Never build a grand business plan based on the assumption that shipping will probably be fine. Check every link, every gauge within your process. History has proven that sometimes your biggest enemy isn't the person shooting back at you, but the tiny technical details you ignored. An 89mm difference in an iron bar helped save the Soviet Union and change the modern world order. If you are running a project, ask yourself, where are the different gauge rails in my system? Don't let a small detail derail your entire train to success. If you found this video useful, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Hard Learned Lessons. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and see you next time.